The elevator doors parted with a soft sigh, releasing Michael Harrison into the marble and glass quiet of the 42nd floor of Harrison Medical Tower. His name was engraved on half the plaques in this building. His money had raised it from dirt and concrete to skyline steel, but this morning the name Harrison meant nothing. His reflection in the polished metal doors didn't look like the billionaire who closed 10-figure deals before breakfast. His tie was knotted perfectly, his shoes shone like black mirrors, but his eyes were hollow, sleepless and frightened. "Mr. Harrison," came the gentle voice of Dr. Patricia Chen. She was standing by her office door, her face composed, but her eyes speaking the truth he dreaded. "Thank you for coming in so quickly." He nodded wordlessly, following her down the sterile hallway where sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows spilled across white tiles. The view stretched over Manhattan, his empire glittering beneath a perfect October sky. But Michael couldn't see it anymore. The city that once represented power now looked fragile, like a toy kingdom waiting to collapse. Inside Dr. Chen's office, the air was thick with unspoken things. A framed medical degree hung behind her desk. A small bonsai tree reached toward the light. The doctor gestured for him to sit. "Michael," she began softly, "not Mr. Harrison, not sir, just Michael." That alone made his stomach drop. The latest results came in this morning. She hesitated, pressing her lips together before continuing. "Tommy's leukemia has progressed faster than we anticipated." He felt his pulse hammer in his temples. The words blurred. "Progressed?" he repeated, his voice breaking like glass. "Acute myeloid leukemia," she said carefully. "It's extremely aggressive. We've tried every available treatment, chemotherapy, targeted therapy, the trial drugs from Switzerland. His body isn't responding." Michael leaned forward, gripping the arms of the chair until his knuckles turned white. "Then find something else. I don't care what it costs. Bring in another team, another country, another planet if you have to." His tone, once commanding boardrooms, now cracked with desperation. Dr. Chen's eyes softened. "Money isn't the problem, Michael. Medicine has limits. And we've reached them. How long?" The question hovered in the air like smoke. She took a slow breath, her voice trembling just slightly. 3 months. Maybe less." Michael's vision blurred. For a moment the world went soundless. No ticking clock, no hum of city life beyond the glass. Just the weight of 3 months pressing down on his soul. 90 days to watch his son, his bright laughing boy who believed his dad could fix anything, fade away. Dr. Chen reached across the desk, her hand hovering in sympathy she knew he couldn't accept. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He nodded numbly, unable to speak. His throat burned with the effort of holding back the scream clawing its way out. When he finally stepped into the corridor again, everything seemed muted. The nurse's footsteps, the soft beep of monitors from distant rooms, the echo of his own breathing. He passed the children's wing, catching a glimpse of a mural painted with rainbows and superheroes. One of them looked almost like Tommy's drawings, the ones he'd taped to the kitchen wall back home. In the elevator, Michael pressed his forehead against the cool mirror, closing his eyes. He saw his son smile, the way Tommy whispered every night, "I love you to the moon and back, Daddy." And then he saw Sarah's face the night she'd packed her suitcase 6 months ago. "I can't watch him die," she'd said, tears cutting through her mascara. "You can buy everything, Michael, but not this." Now he was alone, with all the wealth in the world and no way to spend it where it mattered most. When the elevator reached the lobby, the doors opened to the sterile brightness of marble floors and quiet footsteps. Michael didn't move at first. He just stood there, staring at his reflection one last time. For the first time in his life, Michael Harrison wished he were just a man, not a billionaire, not a CEO, not a name printed on skyscrapers, just a father who could fall to his knees and beg God to change the ending. But no prayer came, only silence, and the slow, merciless ticking of time that had just begun counting down. The afternoon sun melted over Manhattan's glass towers, turning them into pillars of gold. Below their glittering shadows, the world looked smaller, poorer, more human. Michael Harrison sat motionless behind the wheel of his black Bentley, parked across from St. Mary's Children's Hospital. The engine hummed softly, the only sound in a silence so heavy it felt alive. He should have driven home hours ago. But home was just a mausoleum of marble and silence now, a place where every framed photo of Tommy was another wound that refused to heal. He loosened his tie, the silk suddenly choking him. His phone kept buzzing with messages from assistants and board, members, deals, deadlines, meetings. The same empire that had once thrilled him now felt meaningless. A sandcastle. Against an incoming tide, he had everything. And yet, at this very moment, he had nothing. Then something small and bright caught his eye through the windshield, a flicker of color against the gray sidewalk. Across the street stood a little girl, no older than Tommy. Her blonde hair gleamed like spun sunlight, tied in a messy ponytail with a piece of red yarn. She was holding a cardboard tray filled with small, unevenly wrapped candies. The sign taped to the front read in shaky handwriting, "Fresh candy, help me buy school supplies." She called out cheerfully to passersby, "Peppermints, only $1. They're sweet, I promise." Her voice was like a bell in the cold October air, clear, warm, unstoppable. Michael watched her for several minutes, his hand frozen on the steering wheel. Most people walked past her without even a glance. A few smiled politely, but no one stopped. Yet the girl didn't seem discouraged. Every time someone ignored her, she just adjusted her tray and kept calling out, her grin unwavering. Something about her determination hit him deep in the chest. It was the same stubborn light he used to see in Tommy's eyes when he said, "I'm not scared. Daddy, I'm going to beat the monster inside me." A gust of wind swept through the street, tossing the girl's hair into her face. She giggled and pushed it aside, tucking it behind her ear. Her thin coat barely shielded her from the chill, and her sneakers were so worn that strips of duct tape held the soles together. Still, she stood there, radiant, undaunted. Michael turned off the engine and sat in silence. He didn't know why he couldn't look away. Perhaps it was because she looked like everything Tommy once was, pure hope in the middle of pain. Finally, he stepped out of the car. The sound of his Italian leather shoes against the pavement drew a few glances. He approached the girl slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow over her small figure. "Fresh candies for $1, mister," she said brightly, holding out the tray with both hands. "I made them myself. Well, my grandma helped." Michael looked down at the candies. They weren't perfect, some were cracked, others lopsided, but each one was carefully wrapped with love. He reached for his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "I'll take all of them." The girl blinked in surprise. "All of them? Really?" He nodded. "Really?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked as if she might cry, but then she smiled even wider. "You're my best customer ever." Michael placed the bill in her small hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then shook her head and held it back toward him. "No, mister. That's way too much. They're only $1 each." Something inside him cracked a little more. "It's okay," he said softly. "Keep it." But the girl only frowned in confusion, pressing the money back into his palm. "Grandma says we should never take more than what's fair. You can just take a few extra candies instead." He stared at her, this tiny creature standing in the cold, refusing extra money because it didn't feel right. Her moral compass was stronger than the ethics of men who managed billions. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Lucy," she said, smiling shyly. "Lucy Martinez." "And what's yours?" He hesitated. It had been years since anyone asked him that question with genuine curiosity. Not Mr. Harrison, not sir, just him. "Michael," he finally said. "Nice to meet you." "Mr. Michael," she said, mispronouncing it slightly. "Do you have kids?" He swallowed hard, forcing a small nod. "I do, a boy." "His name's Tommy." Her eyes lit up. "Tommy, that's a happy name. Is he in school like me?" He tried to smile, but it came out hollow. "Not right now." Lucy tilted her head, sensing the sadness behind his words, but she didn't pry. Instead, she reached into her tray and pulled out a single candy wrapped with a pink ribbon. "Then you should give him this one. It's the sweetest one I made. Tell him Lucy says to get better soon." Her words hit him like a tremor, gentle yet powerful enough to shatter the walls he'd built around his pain. Michael took the candy with trembling fingers. "Thank you," he murmured. She smiled again, radiant and unaware that she'd just changed something inside him forever. As he walked back to his car, the city lights flickered to life one by one, like stars waking up early. He didn't know why his chest ached differently this time, not with grief, but with a fragile spark of warmth. He didn't know that this little girl with the duct-taped shoes and the tray of candies would soon do what no amount of money, medicine, or influence ever could: Within 24 hours, Lucy Martinez would bring a billionaire to his knees and give his dying son a reason to live again. Under the humming streetlight at the corner of 8th Avenue, Lucy Martinez counted her coins one by one. $57. Enough for a new backpack and maybe a box of crayons. Her little fingers, red from the cold, trembled slightly as she placed the coins back into a tin box with a faded sticker of a sunflower. The cardboard tray that had held her peppermint candies now lay empty beside her. The day had been good, better than most, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Every dollar is a seed, mija. But the sweetest fruit comes from kindness, not coins. Lucy smiled faintly as she thought about the tall man in the suit, the one who had looked like his soul was somewhere far away. She could still see his sad eyes, like the ones she'd seen in the hospital across the street when she sold candies outside. The people there walked slowly, like they carried invisible weights. But his eyes, they were the saddest of them all. By the time she returned to their small apartment, the city was already folding into night. The hallway smelled faintly of cooking oil and laundry soap. Apartment 4B was at the end of the corridor, a space so small it could barely fit its own hope. But inside it was warm. A pot of soup simmered on the stove and her grandmother Rosa sat knitting by the window, her silver hair glowing in the lamplight. "You're late, Lucy girl," Rosa said without looking up. "Were you out there talking to the stars again?" Lucy giggled. "Not stars this time, abuela, a man. A sad one." Rosa paused, her needles clicking to a stop. "Sad men in suits don't usually stop for candy." "This one did," Lucy said proudly, placing her tin box on the table. "He bought all of them, I think. He needed them more than I did." Rosa smiled softly. "You have your mama's heart," she murmured. The name alone stirred something fragile in Lucy. She had never known her mother, only stories. Stories of a woman who had once worked at a hospital, helping sick people smile again, a woman who gave more than she ever had. Lucy took a deep breath. "Abuela, his boy is sick." Rosa's eyes lifted, meeting hers. "The man's son?" Lucy nodded. "He said his name's Tommy. I could tell he's really sick." His dad looked like he was trying not to cry. The old woman's face softened and she crossed herself silently. "May God send that boy an angel." Lucy's gaze drifted toward the window, where the faint glow of the hospital lights flickered across the street. "Maybe God already did," she whispered. "Maybe he just forgot to tell me." That night, as Rosa drifted into sleep, Lucy sat at the small wooden table with her crayons. She wrote slowly, carefully, her tongue poking out between her lips as she shaped each uneven letter. "Dear Tommy, my name is Lucy. I don't know you, but I hope you get better soon. My grandma says when you love someone you never met, that's the kind of love that makes miracles. I'm sending you a candy and a hug in this letter. Please smile again. Love, Lucy Martinez." She folded the note neatly and tied it with a pink ribbon, the same ribbon she used to wrap her last peppermint candy. Then she tucked the bundle into a small envelope and whispered, "This one's for you, Tommy." The next morning, Lucy woke up before dawn. Rosa tried to stop her from going out so early, but Lucy insisted. "I have to give the letter today, abuela. He might be waiting." The streets were quieter than usual, the air thick with that strange stillness New York sometimes had just before sunrise. Lucy's sneakers slapped softly against the pavement as she walked toward St. Mary's Hospital, clutching the envelope close to her chest. Inside the hospital lobby, the receptionist looked up from her computer. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" Lucy nodded bravely. "Please, can you give this to Tommy Harrison? He's 7. I think he's upstairs in the children's rooms." The woman's expression melted into tenderness. "Of course, honey," Lucy beamed. "It's very important. It's for his heart." Hours later, when Tommy Harrison woke up, the first thing he saw on his bedside table wasn't a medical chart or a tube. It was a pink ribbon tied around a piece of candy. His father was still asleep in the chair beside the bed, his suit jacket draped over his shoulders. Tommy reached for the letter and began to read. Each crayon line shimmered with innocent sincerity. By the time he reached the words, "Please smile again," a small grin tugged at the corners of his lips. For the first time in weeks, the boy laughed softly. The sound was light, pure, a spark in the silence of that sterile room. Michael stirred awake and looked up. "Tommy? Daddy?" the boy said, holding up the candy. She said she wants me to smile again. Michael blinked. Who? The girl from your pocket, Tommy replied, his voice sleepy but sure. The one who believes in miracles. Michael froze. He didn't know how Tommy could have known, but in his son's eyes, glowing with a little more light than yesterday, he saw it. Something invisible had shifted. A thread of hope had slipped into their world, woven by a poor little girl who sold candies on a corner and believed that love, even from a stranger, could heal the unhealable. And as Michael pulled the tiny crayon-stained letter close to his chest, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt faith he didn't yet know, that the little girl who'd written that letter would soon become the heartbeat of his son's miracle, and the reason the richest man alive would finally fall to his knees. Morning sunlight spilled through the wide glass windows of St. Mary's Children's Hospital, painting golden streaks across the sterile white floors. Machines hummed softly, nurses whispered down the hallway, and somewhere a child's laughter, rare and fragile, broke the stillness like a melody that didn't belong there. Inside room 407, a little boy with tired eyes and a paper-thin smile sat up in bed clutching a crayon-colored letter to his chest. The name Tommy Harrison was written in bold letters on the door, but the boy inside was no longer the cheerful child who once believed he could fly. His arms were pale, his body small beneath the weight of endless treatments. Yet this morning, something was different. "Daddy," Tommy whispered when he saw Michael wake in the chair beside his bed. The billionaire stirred, rubbing the fatigue from his eyes. He hadn't truly slept in days. "Morning, champ," Michael murmured, forcing a smile. "How's my superhero today?" Tommy grinned weakly. "Better." He held up the crayon letter like it was a treasure map. "She wrote to me." "She?" Michael asked. "The girl from yesterday. The one you told me about, the candy girl." Tommy's voice was stronger now, almost alive with excitement. "She said she's praying for me. Look, Daddy, she even drew a rainbow." Michael blinked in disbelief. The note was written in messy but colorful handwriting, each word traced over multiple times as if the writer wanted every letter to matter. Little hearts dotted the I's. At the bottom, a shaky pink heart surrounded the name, Lucy Martinez. As Tommy read it again, his laughter filled the room, a sound Michael hadn't heard in weeks. It wasn't much. It wasn't medicine, but it was something. Dr. Chen entered quietly, carrying a clipboard. She paused at the door, watching father and son for a moment. "Someone's in good spirits this morning," she said softly. Tommy smiled. "Lucy made me feel better." Michael looked up at her. "A girl sent him a letter," he said, his voice unsteady. "I don't know how she even knew his name." Dr. Chen smiled faintly. "Children have a way of sensing things we adults forget. Hope, kindness. They speak the same language." As the doctor left, Michael studied his son again. For the first time, he saw light in those weary eyes, a spark of fight, a flicker of belief. That evening, when Tommy drifted to sleep, Michael pulled the note from the nightstand and stared at it again. Something about it, its innocence, its courage, stirred a longing deep in him. He couldn't explain why, but he needed to find that little girl. Not for charity, not for guilt, but because she had given his son something money never could. The will to keep living. The next afternoon, Michael returned to the same corner outside the hospital. The October wind had grown colder, chasing leaves across the sidewalk. For a terrifying moment, he thought she might not come. Then he saw her, small as ever, standing proudly behind her cardboard tray of candies, smiling at strangers who mostly ignored her. Fresh candy. $1. They're sweet and magical, she sang. Michael crossed the street slowly, his expensive shoes crunching on the fallen leaves. Lucy spotted him first. Her smile widened, her eyes lighting up like the city skyline at night. "Mr. Michael," she chirped as if they were old friends. Did Tommy like his candy? Michael froze, breath catching in his throat. How did you know his name?" Lucy giggled. "You said it yesterday when you talked about him." "I remembered. I wanted him to smile again." "Did it work?" Michael's voice cracked. "Yes," he whispered. "You made him smile." Lucy's entire face brightened. "Then it worked. Grandma says when you do something with love, it always finds its way." He knelt down to her height, struggling to steady his voice. "You did more than make him smile, Lucy. You gave him something I couldn't." She tilted her head. "What's that?" "Hope," he said softly. For a moment neither of them spoke. The city roared around them, car horns, footsteps, wind, but in that sliver of time, the world seemed to stop. Then Lucy reached into her coat pocket and pulled out another small piece of candy, this one tied with a blue ribbon. "This one's special," she said. "I prayed over it last night. You have to give it to Tommy yourself." Michael took it with shaking hands. "Thank you." Lucy nodded proudly, unaware that the richest man in the city was struggling to hold back tears in front of a 7-year-old street vendor. That night, as he sat by Tommy's bed and placed the blue ribbon candy on his pillow, he couldn't shake the thought that there was something extraordinary about that girl, something otherworldly, almost divine. And he was right. Because the next day, while delivering candies to another vendor nearby, Lucy collapsed suddenly, her tiny body crumpling onto the cold pavement. When paramedics rushed her to St. Mary's, the same hospital where Tommy was fighting for his life, fate quietly wove its cruelest and most miraculous thread. Before the night was over, doctors would discover a secret no one could have predicted. A truth so shocking it would bring the most powerful man in the city to his knees. The little girl who sold peppermint candies wasn't just Tommy's miracle. She was his only chance at survival. Late that night, thunder rolled above Manhattan like the growl of something ancient. Rain lashed against the glass walls of St. Mary's Hospital, blurring the city lights into trembling streaks of gold and blue. Inside the emergency ward, nurses rushed through the halls, their sneakers squeaking on the wet tiles. The metallic tang of antiseptic filled the air. In room 407, Michael Harrison was still sitting at his son's bedside, reading Tommy's favorite comic book aloud. His voice was steady, but his eyes were glassy and tired. Tommy had fallen asleep mid-superhero battle, his small hand wrapped around the blue-ribboned candy Lucy had given him. A knock came at the door. Dr. Patricia Chen stepped in, her usually composed face unusually tense. "Michael," she said quietly, "there's something you need to see." Her tone carried a weight that twisted his stomach. He followed her down the hall toward the pediatric ICU. The machines beeped softly behind every curtain, a fragile symphony of survival. "An emergency admission came in 2 hours ago," Dr. Chen explained as they walked. "A little girl collapsed near the hospital entrance. She had a severe fainting episode, likely from malnutrition and exhaustion." She paused. "Her name is Lucy Martinez." Michael froze mid-step. "Lucy," he whispered. "Yes," Dr. Chen nodded. "Your son's friend." When they reached the ICU window, Michael's breath caught in his throat. There she was, Lucy, the same little girl who'd stood proudly on the corner selling her candies, now lying small and pale beneath a tangle of tubes. Her hair fanned out over the pillow like a halo. A faint bruise shadowed her temple from the fall. "She's stable for now," Dr. Chen said, "but she's severely undernourished. She's been living on little more than sugar and soup for weeks." Michael pressed his palm against the glass, staring at the fragile figure beyond. "Can I see her?" Dr. Chen hesitated. "In a moment. There's something else?" She gestured for him to follow her into a consultation room, her voice dropping to a whisper. "As part of her admission, we ran standard blood work. Out of procedure, I compared it against the marrow-type records we have for Tommy. Michael." She took a slow breath. "She's a perfect match." The words hit him like thunder. He sank into the nearest chair, unable to speak. "A perfect match?" He finally breathed. "Yes. A 1 in a million compatibility. Her marrow could save Tommy's life." Dr. Chen met his eyes gravely. "But she's just a child herself. The transplant could be risky for her." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain pounding the windows. Michael's mind reeled. Fate had brought this girl into their lives for a reason so extraordinary it felt unreal. The same child who'd handed Tommy a piece of candy and told him to smile again was now the only one who could keep that smile alive. "Does she know?" he asked. "Not yet," Dr. Chen said softly. "She'll need her grandmother's consent and yours if you agree to proceed." He nodded slowly, his hands shaking. "I need to see her." When he entered Lucy's room, the girl stirred weakly, her lashes fluttering open. Her eyes found him almost instantly. "Mr. Michael?" she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "You look sad again." He swallowed hard. "You scared us, kiddo," he said, managing a broken smile. "You fainted." Lucy frowned. "I guess I forgot to eat again. Grandma's gonna be mad." Michael knelt beside her bed, his throat thick. "Lucy." The doctors found something incredible. You can help Tommy. Your blood matches his. You could save him. Her small brow furrowed as she processed the words. You mean, I can make him better? Yes, he said, his voice cracking. You can give him a chance to live. She was silent for a long moment. Then, with the solemnity only a child with an old soul could possess, she nodded. Then I want to do it. Michael blinked, stunned. Lucy, you don't understand. It's not easy. It's surgery. It'll hurt. You don't have to. But I want to, she interrupted, her voice firmer now. Tommy's my friend. He laughed because of me. And if I can make him laugh forever, then it's worth it. Tears burned behind Michael's eyes. You're just a little girl, he whispered. You shouldn't have to be this brave. Lucy gave a small, tired smile. Someone has to be, Mr. Michael. Maybe God picked me. Her grandmother, Rosa, entered quietly, her hands trembling around the handle of her worn purse. She looked from Lucy to Michael, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. She told me everything, Rosa said softly. She's stubborn like her mother. Once she decides to do something kind, nothing on earth can stop her. Michael stood and faced her. Mrs. Martinez, I'll make sure she's taken care of. I'll cover every expense, anything she or you need for the rest of your lives. The old woman shook her head gently. You already owe us nothing. My Lucy doesn't want money, senor. She just wants to see that boy smile again. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating Lucy's tiny figure through the glass. She was humming quietly to herself, tracing invisible shapes in the air. Rainbows, perhaps. Michael turned away before his tears could fall. He had built empires. He had conquered boardrooms. But tonight, for the first time in his life, he was utterly powerless before the courage of a child. As the storm raged over the city, the preparations for the transplant began. Doctors and nurses moved with quiet urgency, their faces grave but hopeful. And somewhere deep inside the billionaire's heart, a prayer began to form, one he didn't know he still remembered. Please, he whispered to the empty hallway. Don't take her away too. He didn't know that by dawn, one child's act of sacrifice would transform 2 lives, and that the miracle he'd begged for would come at a price he never could have imagined. The hospital was wrapped in a storm that night. Wind clawed at the windows. Rain flung itself against the glass in wild fury. Inside, the world had shrunk to 2 rooms, one where a billionaire's son waited to live, and another where a little girl prepared to give him that chance. Michael Harrison stood in the dim chapel, his reflection trembling in the candlelight. His suit jacket hung open, his tie was gone, and the man who once owned half the skyline looked like someone stripped bare before God. The surgeon's voice echoed in his mind. If all goes well, both children will recover. But Lucy's small, too small for this to be without risk. He pressed his palms together and bowed his head. You can take my money, he whispered to the silence. Take my company, my name, take everything. Just don't take them, his voice cracked. Don't take her. Down the hall, doctors were prepping Lucy. The sterile light made her skin seem almost translucent. She lay still on the operating table, her tiny hands folded over her chest. Dr. Chen stood beside her, checking monitors with quiet reverence, her professional calm unable to hide the sheen in her eyes. Are you scared, sweetheart? The nurse asked softly. Lucy smiled, faint but unbroken. A little. But I promised Tommy he'd get to go outside again. I have to keep my promise. The nurse's lips trembled into a smile. You're very brave. Lucy looked past the bright light above her. I'm not brave. I just want him to laugh again. When he laughed, I felt warm, like the world wasn't so big and cold anymore. Her words were too pure, too steady, for the room full of adults who knew what her bravery might cost. On the other side of the wall, Tommy was being prepared as well. The boy squeezed his father's hand. Daddy? Michael leaned close. Yeah, buddy. Will she be okay? He couldn't lie. She's strong, he said quietly. The strongest girl I've ever met. Tommy nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Then I'll be strong too. Hours blurred into eternity. The clock hands crawled. Nurses moved in and out like ghosts. The storm outside roared louder, as if heaven itself was holding its breath. Michael sat in the waiting room, his head buried in his hands. Rosa sat beside him, clutching a rosary so tightly that her fingers had turned white. Every so often she whispered, Dios mío, cuídala. God, take care of her. Then, at last, Dr. Chen appeared at the door, her surgical cap still on, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Michael leapt to his feet. Doctor? She gave a small, trembling nod. The transplant was a success. Tommy's body accepted the marrow beautifully. He exhaled sharply, a sound that was half sob, half laughter. But then he saw it, the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. And Lucy? He asked. Dr. Chen's voice softened to almost nothing. She's alive, but she's weak. Her body's struggling to recover from the strain. We're moving her to intensive care. She needs time. Michael's joy shattered into fear again. He followed the doctors as they wheeled Lucy past. Her face was pale as snow, her breathing shallow but steady. The blue ribbon from her candy was still tied around her wrist like a charm. He sank to his knees beside her bed as they stopped in the ICU. Lucy, he whispered, taking her small hand in his. You did it, sweetheart. You saved him. Tommy's okay. You did it, her eyelids fluttered. For a moment he thought she might wake, but she only murmured one word, barely audible. Smile. And then her hand went limp in his. Hours later the hospital was quiet again. The storm had broken. Dawn's first light slipped through the curtains like a sigh. Michael sat in the same chair. His son asleep down the hall, alive and safe, and Lucy, the girl who had saved him, lying still in a bed that seemed far too big. He watched the sunlight crawl across the floor toward her face. He wanted to rage at the heavens, to demand an explanation, but the only sound he could make was a whisper. She gave my son his life. Please give her hers. Behind him, Rosa stepped forward, her old hands trembling as she laid them on his shoulders. She's stronger than she looks, senor, she said softly. Sometimes angels just need to rest. He turned, tears spilling down his cheeks. She's not an angel, Rosa. She's a little girl. She shouldn't have to save the world. Rosa smiled sadly. Maybe she was born to. The monitors beside the bed beeped slowly, the rhythm fragile but steady. Lucy was fighting. Even in her sleep, even on the edge between worlds, she was fighting, and for the first time, Michael understood something that money, power, and medicine could never teach him. Miracles don't roar, they whisper. He reached out and held her hand again. You win, Lucy, he said quietly. You've already changed everything. Outside, the first birds began to sing over Manhattan. The storm had passed. The sun was rising, and somewhere deep within the pale, sleeping child who had given away everything she had, a heartbeat grew stronger. The world didn't know it yet, but the richest man alive had just been saved by the smallest, poorest girl on the street. Morning broke gently over Manhattan. After a night of thunder and fear, the city seemed reborn, washed clean by rain. The glass towers glittered like they'd been dipped in gold. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, everything was quieter, the kind of silence that holds its breath, afraid to break the spell. Michael Harrison stood by a window in the pediatric ICU, his hands in his pockets, his heart heavy but beating again for the first time in months. Down the hallway, Tommy's laughter echoed, faint, fragile, but real. The doctor said his body was already responding to the transplant. His color was returning. His smile was coming back, his life was being given back to him. But the price of that miracle lay asleep in room 412, Lucy Martinez. The candy girl, the stranger who had done what the world's most brilliant minds and billions of dollars could not. She was still unconscious, hooked up to machines that breathed for her small, exhausted body. Tubes snaked across her arms like pale vines. Yet her face, peaceful, soft, faintly smiling bows, looked untouched by pain. Michael sat by her bed, his elbows on his knees, her tiny hand wrapped in his. He had spent the entire night there, watching the monitors flicker like the heartbeat of something divine. She's stable, Dr. Chen had told him at dawn, but she hasn't woken up. She's fighting, Michael. She's not giving up. He had nodded silently. The man who once moved markets with a single decision could now do nothing but sit and wait. Beside Lucy's bed sat Rosa, her grandmother, the old woman's eyes sunken from sleeplessness. She clutched a small bundle of papers in her wrinkled hands. Senor Michael, she said softly, I need to show you something. She unwrapped the bundle carefully. Yellowed photographs, a folded hospital document, and a letter, edges worn from being opened too many times. Michael frowned. What is this? Rosa's eyes glistened. It's time you knew. Lucy's mother worked here 7 years ago. She was a nurse. Her name was Anna. The name struck something faint and familiar in Michael's mind. She took care of a newborn once, Rosa continued, her voice trembling. A little boy who was very sick. His mother died giving birth to him. Michael's breath caught. His pulse thundered in his ears. That little boy, Rosa whispered, was Tommy. He stared at her, speechless. She never told you her name, did she? Rosa asked gently. Anna didn't have anyone left but Lucy. When she came home after working at the hospital, she used to say, "There's a baby there who's going to change the world." She said he had the brightest eyes she'd ever seen. Rosa's voice broke. She died a year later. Lucy was only 2. Michael's knees went weak. His hands trembled as he reached for the photograph Rosa was holding. A smiling nurse with golden hair and kind eyes, standing beside a newborn wrapped in a blanket. Tommy. His son. It was her. The woman he remembered vaguely from the delivery room. The one who had refused to leave the baby's side until he stabilized. The woman he had tried to thank but never saw again. He looked up, tears spilling freely now. Lucy, she's Anna's daughter. Rosa nodded. Yes, senor. I didn't know until the doctors showed me the tests. She shares blood with your boy. Michael staggered back, gripping the edge of the bed to steady himself. His mind reeled, but his heart understood instantly what science had only confirmed. Lucy hadn't just saved Tommy's life. She was his sister. A sob escaped him. He sank to his knees beside her bed, clutching her tiny hand in both of his. You saved your brother, he whispered, his voice cracking. You saved him, little one. You saved him. Rosa was crying quietly behind him. She has your kindness, she said softly. Your boy's laugh, your wife's eyes, but she had her mother's heart. Too big for her own body. At that moment, a small sound broke the silence, a whisper soft as the flutter of wings. Mr. Michael. He froze. Lucy's fingers twitched in his hand. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing the faintest glimpse of blue, deep oceanic and shimmering with light. Lucy, he gasped, standing up so fast the chair toppled behind him. Lucy, sweetheart, you're awake. Her lips curved into a weak smile. Did Tommy smile today? Michael's voice broke entirely. He nodded, tears blurring his vision. He did, Lucy. He's smiling right now. She smiled wider, tears collecting at the corners of her eyes. Then I did it. You did more than that, he said, choking on the words. You saved him. You saved all of us. Her small hand found his, pressing lightly against his palm. Can I see him? Moments later, Dr. Chen wheeled Tommy in, tiny, pale, but beaming. He ran the last few steps, his IV trailing behind him, and threw his arms around Lucy. Hi, Lucy, he said, his voice bursting with joy. Guess what? I'm not sick anymore. Lucy giggled weakly, her arms trembling as she hugged him back. I told you, she whispered. Love makes miracles. Michael covered his face with his hands and wept silently. It was too much, too beautiful, too impossible. The 2 children held each other, the hospital lights glimmering around them like halos. When Lucy's grip loosened, Tommy pulled back, confused. Lucy, she smiled faintly. Don't be sad if I get sleepy again, okay? Just keep smiling. Promise? Tommy nodded, tears filling his eyes. Promise. Her eyes fluttered closed again, but this time her breathing was strong, steady. The monitors kept their rhythm, a heartbeat that whispered life. Outside, the rain stopped completely. Sunlight poured through the window, spilling across the bed, bathing both children in gold. Michael turned toward Rosa. She's coming home with us, he said quietly. Both of you are. From this day on, your family. Rosa's hands trembled as she crossed herself. Gracias, señor. For seeing what she's always been, an angel in a little girl's skin. Michael knelt beside the children, his voice breaking as he whispered, No, Rosa, she's more than an angel. He looked at Lucy, sleeping peacefully beside her brother. She's the miracle I didn't deserve. Outside the hospital, the city roared back to life. Sirens, laughter, car horns, all melting into the sound of a world reborn. And on the windowsill of room 412, where sunlight met shadow, Lucy's last candy sat wrapped in pink ribbon, untouched, gleaming softly in the light, a reminder that sometimes The smallest heart can save the biggest one. That love, pure, stubborn, and unbending, and can make even a billionaire fall to his knees and believe in miracles again. The end.